Hey guys, as stated in the description, I am making my Belizean stewed chicken. I did beforehand clean my chicken. I have drumettes in there with some thighs. I cut up some about half of an onion, sliced it. I do use vinegar to clean my chicken. That's some thyme. You put enough seasoning, oregano too, that you're envisioning coating both sides of the pieces a little bit, just about that. I don't measure anything. Ground black pepper. Sometimes I use fresh ground depending on what I'm making. If it's a small something, I'll really ground it. But for this, it was a lot, so I just sprinkled it. I did use the achiote. Ricardo is what we call it in Belize. Ricardo. I use some of that. You'll see how I will squeeze that in there when I am marinating everything together. So you put all the seasoning first. I'm going to crush some garlic, get that really good in there. Sometimes I use about 5, 6 cloves, so it's pretty much a lot of garlic. This one I think I only used 3 because I was using garlic powder as well, so it's fine. That's me sprinkling some Worcestershire sauce. It just adds a little tang to it that we tend to like, along with the little vinegar that we do put in there. See, that's me, the garlic. That's all the garlic I use this time. I usually double that, but I didn't feel like opening another pack of garlic, so that's what I did. And I did cut up some half of, that wasn't a big bell pepper, was from my garden. It's not seeming to be growing too big, so I cut up a half. It was so crunchy I wanted to just bite some. So I do squeeze all of that together, marinate it, marrying all the seasoning and spices together. Yes, I did forget to put the salt, so you're going to see me add some salt after in order for me to mix it in there together. Of course, you do need salt, which helps with the marinating and the flavor. Now this, I did cover this was Sunday dinner, and I had time Saturday evening, so I did marinate this overnight and well into the morning. The longer you marinate it, of course, the better. Overnight to when you're going to cook it that afternoon is great. Most times, I get this from my grandmother. Most times you season it early morning. She would take her meat out the night before, put it on the counter, frozen. In the morning, it's thawed. See the salt that I had forgotten. So now I'm going to get started. I use coconut oil. I'm only putting enough to coat the bottom of the pan a little. And this is one of my favorite Le Creuset saucers. I love this pan. The lid, the dome lid that goes on top. I love it to stew my chicken in. So I'm going to get that hot. Once it's hot and just smoking a little, enough to create a sizzle, then I can get started by adding the pieces. This is not really considered the Jamaican brown stew chicken or the brown stew chicken the way we make it, because I'm not pre-frying by batches first. That's the difference. So I'll do that another time. This is truly just the stew chicken the way I remember my grandma used to make it, and that's why I do it. So I'm waiting right here for the oil to get hot, and then I will get started. Over here you see that water boiling. I have my potatoes boiling back there for my potato salad that's going to go with this meal, and you will see that on my next video. So I'm going to put the pieces in with just a little bit of the spices on it, a little bit of the herbs. I don't want all of the herbs on it because you need to leave some reserve for when it's about 3/4 of a way through. Then you add the remainder of it. See, I wasn't sure if the oil was ready, so I kept waiting, but because I really wanted that sizzle on it, but to really brown the meat. So I will get started just about now. I'm putting one piece at a time. Yes, see? Usually you wouldn't want the pieces to touch because then that will create more of steam, I would say. It will prevent them from really browning. But because I decided to not make the brown stew chicken, I didn't mind putting them together. See, I was putting that little, we save those little pie pans because then if I'm going to make the brown all of them first, I will put them in that batch the moment they get brown. But I decided to just go ahead and make life easier for me on this Sunday and just do it lightly brown like that. And I am using a stove fork, cooking fork, but I'm not piercing the meat at all with that fork because I don't want any of the natural juices of the meat to come out. So this is why I use that fork just to take them out of the pan, but I'm not piercing them at all. So yeah, I made a spill with some of my onions popped out. So I ended up getting that spoon because I decided that I'm not going to do the brown stew. I'm just gonna put them all in. So yeah, that's why I'm moving that out the way. I changed my mind. I realized I'm doing too much by doing a potato salad and all. So yes, I'm just gonna go ahead and put them all in. Look at that. Look at that. It's gonna be so delicious. So yes, some of them was already starting to do a little brown that I want. I'm not trying to just totally fry them, and that little bit of grease that I did was enough. Once the natural broth starts coming out of it, I don't want that to dry down and dissolve away. So I'm quick to do it to form. You see the bubbling? You can see a little bubbling at the bottom. That's what you want, and that's the natural juices from the chicken, and you want all of that to remain there. So all that steam is forming. See, I'm not going to get all of the natural herbs, the onions, I'm going to end up adding cilantro later. I added a little bit to it here. I didn't have enough in my garden, so I had to just go get a little bit. And we always add, I know my grandmother always adds cilantro to her stewed chicken or her stewed anything, so it just add a great flavor. So that's in there. That's a little vinegar, some of the spices and the herbs. You end up just putting a little bit of it at the top, just a little like that, and then you leave the rest inside because you just want it to cook with some of the spices and some of that, and you're going to leave the remainder until, like I said, when it's about 3/4 of a way cooked, then you want to add the remainder of that, and it just make the juices so good, and the onions help to thicken the broth, and I mean everything is just great. I have Sometimes you can add chicken broth. We don't like to. My grandmother never did. I have my kettle on with the water boiling. I prefer to put boiling water in there, but I forgot to turn it on early. But yes, I only add chicken broth sometimes when I didn't get to really marinate my meat. But if I marinate the meat, the only thing I add in is water. I do not like adding the chicken broth. There's no need because the chicken will develop its own broth. So there's just no need for that. So here we go. In a little while, once everything is to the brown that I think it should be, then I'm going to add some water. My grandmother would always make it sizzle, and then you add the water slowly. We're going to get to that part shortly. Right here, I'm scraping the bottom of the pan because the spices is getting there and I don't want it to stick because that's all the flavor. So when I pour the water, I'm really going to do that because I want to bring up all that flavor and all that spices that's at the bottom. See, that's it. My grandmother would do that. Just add a little bit of water for it to bubble and you scrape up the spices because you don't want it to stick to the bottom because that's what gives your gravy the flavor. That's what's creating your gravy, creating your sauce, creating your broth, whatever word you want to use, sauce, gravy, broth, you're creating it there. So with that is just plain old water. That is it. Once it sizzles, then I go ahead and add the rest. And the water, as you can see, it will just be enough water to cover the meat. And not all of the meat entirely because it depends on the size of the meat, the portion that you have in there, because you will flip it around. So you see some of the thighs isn't covered or the leg, the drumettes isn't covered totally. And that's perfectly fine. You want to cover, just put enough water to almost cover everything. But that is it. So that will get to a boil. Once it starts boiling, I realize a lot of times when I'm cooking my stewed chicken, I barely ever leave out the kitchen until it's done. Because if I walk away from something, baby, the smell and the major sizzle from the kitchen will remind me that, oh shit, I'm cooking. So I tend to just stay in the kitchen for the duration. Okay, so it started boiling back again. So now it's time for me to add my tomato sauce. So because I'm cooking Belizean dish, I figure I have to put in my accent every now and then, make want to know that I truly come from Belize. So that's the tomato sauce. I put it in once it starts to boil, and now I just stir. Yes, just stir it a little bit, and I'm always throughout. You'll see me scraping the sides. That's me getting all the flavor that will naturally, as it's boiling, and there's the steam or the flavor rises to the sides. I don't know, as it's boiling down, it's rising. It sticks to the sides, and I want all of my flavor in my food. So I'm going to be scraping those edges, and you'll be seeing me scraping the edges of the pot throughout. But look at that, how delicious that look. And my potatoes back there aren't being neglected. That's another video I'll be doing, how I make my Belizean potato salad. So stay tuned for that. It should be, I will be posting it right after this. Yeah, check and make sure they're not getting too soft, but that they are on their way to getting to where I want it. So now it's just gonna be boiling down, and I'm gonna decide to just cover it up a little bit. When you cover it, you want to turn the fire down a little to about a medium on the fire before I cover it, so it doesn't boil over. But it's hard to boil over with this pan, this Le Creuset pot, so it really holds everything in. So I decided to just take the lid off again because if the lid is on, it takes longer for the liquid to dissolve, of course. And at this point, I'm sorry, I was having a hiccup. At this point, it's pretty much done cooking as far as the meat being done. but I still want to infuse more flavor in there. So, and I need the sauce to thicken. The onion is going to help it to thicken. That's why I use so much onion and the other herbs. So I decided to take off the lid just so that it could just thicken up, evaporate on its own and all. Usually if we put the lid on, how my grandmother would do it, it's almost like a quarter of a weight on, and that would prevent it from boiling over. But for me, I just lower the stove and cover it when I need to. If I need to walk away for some time, then I definitely will cover it, turn the stove down a little bit, of course, so that nothing gets, if any little bugs, anything to fly in my food, I will not want that at all. So if I'm not there, I will cover it and let it just simmer. That's when it's simmering with the lid on, and I know nothing's going to happen. It's not going to overcook, nothing, because I've turned it down and it takes longer. So now I'm still going at it. I'm able to check on it. I moved the potatoes, so I'm dealing with the potatoes at this point. That's why the pot is just doing its thing cooking. Now I'm back to just checking. With that, I just move it around a little bit and I'm checking. Now I'm going to check to make sure it's salty enough. The gravy, that's how you check to make sure the gravy, the sauce, the broth is salty enough. Just by a little dab in there and checking it to see. And at that point, it was fine for me, or I couldn't really tell because it's still really liquidy. And so that's not a good judgment. So I waited, and I'm going to do that again shortly. What you're seeing is me starting my rice back there. So I wanted to, yes, so I'm cooking the chicken here. The potatoes is cooling. Potatoes and egg is cooling off. And I'm starting my rice. You got to cook the whole meal at once. So that's three things going on. And then I'll also make the plantain. We always put a little, not always, but sometimes depending on what I'm cooking. Back there, I put a little coconut oil inside of the rice. And it wasn't a full spoon. It was just too little. It could have been one full spoon instead of two little ones. So you'll see me do that on another video, how I make my coconut rice. That's not fully the coconut rice, because for the full flavor coconut rice, I use coconut milk and a little coconut oil, but that's for another video. But I just so happened to have been doing it while I was stewing my chicken, because the meal is stewed chicken, potato salad, white rice, and fried plantains. And that was Sunday dinner. So you see certain spots, you could see it forming on the side of the pan, the sauce. It will stick to the pan, the flavor, and I just look at that as flavor, and I want that off of there. So that's why I would scrape the sides and all of that. So pretty soon, see, remember the remainder, I did not put all of the herbs, so now I'm adding it. So now that is fresh thyme and oregano out of my garden, out of my vegetable and herb garden. Yes, I put it in there. And I am getting the remainder, herbs and spices, and I will put that on top. I think on the side, you don't see me away, I'm cutting on some cilantro. Yes, put some cilantro in there. The fresh herbs, that sauce is going to be delicious. Just put some cilantro because we love cilantro. It adds a delicious flavor to the stewed chicken. That is the just the juices from the chicken while it was marinating, along with some vinegar that was in there, and that's the remainder: bell pepper, onion, all the herbs and spices. I used some of the hot juice, the hot sauce to get it out of there, to get it all out of the container. I'm sorry I had the bowl facing the camera because I am right-handed and I needed all the control of my right hand to do what I was doing. So I couldn't turn the bowl the other way for you to see because it would have been awkward for me. But that's what I am doing there. Getting all the remainder herbs because the sauce is down less than half of what it needs to be. So now you got to cook away the raw meat off these vegetables and allow them to soften a little bit. And oh my gosh, everything will be done shortly. That is almost the ending of the cooking. My grandmother used to do that. That's the habanero pepper that I had the night before seasoning it. It was with the other herbs. So you do not want to burst that pepper. It will ruin your meal if that pepper bursts in that pot. Because of course, if you don't like pepper, you will not be able to eat it. If you can't stand spice, you will not be able to eat that meal. That one pepper busting in that pot will ruin the entire pot. And that's how hot the habanero peppers are. So you just set it at the top. You don't want to get it lost in there to where it's possibly could get punctured by a bone or just doing too much. Your spoon can touch it the wrong way. And yeah, it has ruined a full plate because not everyone deals with the spices well, but it's almost done. There I go, scraping the sides again and getting the flavor off the side, checking to see again if it needs salt because it is. I put everything in there now. I put the extra herbs, I put the habanero pepper, I put everything out of the juice. And yes, I thought it wasn't salty enough for me. And it's best to not enough salt than too much salt from the start. So you can always add some salt. So this is the way I always saw my grandma, or, being Belizean, McGranny, used to do the salt like that in the pot spoon, and then you put it in the juice and sprinkle it all over. You don't just put salt directly on it. You could judge it better like that. That's it. That's how it's done. To make sure that it's salty enough. Now it is all good. This is just about done. As the juice is thickening, you don't want it to water down too much because, we want enough juice for everyone to get on their rice with their plate of food. Because some of us, we also put a little gravy on top of our potato salad. So you don't want it to dry down too much. So, but you don't want it to be too runny, too liquidy. You want it to thicken up. So at this point, everything is cooked. You're just thickening up the juice and it's almost done. I really babysat this a little more than usual because I am recording. I wanted to make sure it's right, and that was the okay sign, so everything tastes nice. So that was it. It was done. The sauce, I believe at that point, was just about done enough for me. So you see how I'm separating it, and now you can see the bottom? That's when you know it's done. For me, that's the sign. That's what my granny did to make sure that you know it's time to turn it off. Anything more than that, you're not going to have enough juice for anyone, and you'll have to be adding water to your pot later. And I don't like to do that. We do it the next day if you need to add more gravy because everybody ate too much. But then you'll just put some water and reheat it to thicken it again. But at this point,
it's done.
dinner is done. The chicken, at least, is done for Sunday dinner. See, the pepper is still intact. It didn't burst. And that is all. That's how you make the Belizean stewed chicken for Sunday dinner or any day of the week that you want. I hope you get it right when you do it and enjoy just as much as we did. All right then, until next time, take care, all right?
Like we say.